Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to, dig for the truth, especially when it's buried deep under layers of history, maybe political games or even court decisions.
Exactly. And today we're looking at something particularly frustrating for anyone trying to piece together the past.
Yeah, that moment when you find out there was crucial evidence, like a black box from a plane crash, or maybe a taped confession, even raw footage.
The definitive proof.
Right. The proof exists, or it did exist, but then it's deliberately locked away. Or worse, destroyed completely.
And that's our mission today. We're not just going to recount three separate and quite tragic stories. We want to look behind the curtain.
At the machinery of secrecy itself.
Precisely. What forces are at play? Political needs, trying to protect the public's feelings, maybe legal maneuvering, the reasons why someone actively chooses to hide the full story.
So for you listening, this is about understanding not just what went down, but maybe why we still don't have the whole picture.
Yeah, why the gaps remain.
And the way things are hidden is really different in each case we've got lined up. We're diving into three pretty unsettling situations. First, there's this Cold War plane crash mystery near Beirut. A real catastrophe where, the state basically controlled the whole story to protect its image.
Then we shift gears completely.
Yeah, to something deeply personal. A horrifying murder-suicide confession from 1964, recorded on tape in Wales. But the authorities decided it was just too disturbing, too personal for anyone to hear.
Sealed away.
And finally, we look at a much more recent infamous case, the deliberate destruction by the courts of video evidence showing the crimes of Canada's most notorious serial killer.
Well, undeniable proof.
Just gone.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with that first one. The kind of ultimate example of state control over a disaster. A catastrophe turned into a classified secret for, almost 5 decades now?
Malev Flight 240.
Malev Flight 240.
Okay, so to really get why Malev Flight 240 is still such a mystery, you kind of have to put yourself back in Hungary in 1975.
Right, deep in the Cold War, deep in it. Hungary's firmly in the Soviet sphere. And that means, significant political repression. They're facing economic difficulties, heavily tied to the Soviet bloc. And there's just this pervasive atmosphere of secrecy.
Everything's controlled.
Everything. And that environment, it's absolutely key to this whole story because the Hungarian government was incredibly sensitive about how it looked to the outside world.
Especially to the West.
Especially to the West. Their big priority was projecting this image of, stability, being modern, competent, particularly with things like international airlines.
Right, because an airline like the Lev, the flag carrier, it signals connection technology.
Exactly, it's a symbol. So anything that could possibly threaten that image, and especially a mass casualty event involving their own airline.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario for image control.
Absolutely, it would be handled immediately with maximum state control, no question.
So the impulse isn't transparency. It's not, let's find out what happened so it doesn't happen again.
Not primarily, no, not in that context. The immediate reaction is damage limitation, protect the state's reputation, which is why, fundamentally, the evidence around this crash is still totally locked down.
Treated like a state secret, not an accident investigation.
Oh, got it. It was contained immediately.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of the flight itself. This was Malev Flight 240, scheduled September 30th, 1975, flying from Budapest Prahi International Airport to Beirut International in Lebanon. It's supposed to be just over 5 hours, pretty standard long-haul flight for the time.
But things started going wrong, basically, from the get-go. Before the plane even left the gate, there was this huge delay.
How long?
A full 6 hours, just sitting there.
Yeah.
The official reason they gave was poor conditions down in Beirut, weather or something at the airport.
6 hours that's a really long time to hold a flight, isn't it? Even back then.
It's substantial. And what makes it even more, unsettling, according to the sources we looked at, alongside this massive delay, there were apparently these weird rumors starting to spread among the people waiting to board. Rumors about missing passengers.
Missing passengers, like people who were supposed to be on the flight but weren't accounted for.
Something like that. It's vague, but the sources say it created this hint of concern even before they took off, like a feeling that something wasn't quite right.
Wow. Okay, so you've got a 6-hour delay, rumors swirling. Not exactly a confidence-inspiring start.
Definitely puts a bit of an ominous vibe on things, doesn't it? But eventually, despite all that, the delays, the unease, Flight 240 finally got airborne, late, 11:10 p.m., #1.2, the final moments and loss of communication.
So they take off, And the first part of the flight, at least, seems to have been totally normal.
Yeah, routine. The crew's talking to air traffic control, ATC, just like they should. Flying south, passengers probably settling in, watching the lights of Budapest disappear below.
Just another overnight flight.
Pretty much. That continued until they were getting close to Lebanon, entering the airspace near Beirut. Around 2:4 in the morning, ATC clears them for their final approach. Everything looks good. They're heading into land.
Standard procedure.
Until it wasn't. Just minutes after getting that clearance to land, the crew gets new instructions.
What kind of instructions?
They're told to stop their descent, turn back, enter a holding pattern.
Why?
The reason given was airport congestion at Beirut. Too busy, apparently.
Okay. That happens sometimes, right? Holding patterns aren't that unusual.
They're not unusual, no. But here's where it gets really strange and, frankly, quite suspicious.
Go on.
This order to hold. It happened while they were right over the Mediterranean Sea, pretty close to the Lebanese coast. And then, just 5 minutes after getting told to hold, poof, communication with Flight 240 just stops, dead silence.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. The aircraft, this big passenger jet, no longer responded to air traffic control. It just vanished from the radar screens, gone within that tiny window.
Okay, wait. You have to stop and think about that.
Yeah.
A large commercial airliner under ATC control, cleared to land, then told to hold, and 5 minutes later, it just disappears.
Completely.
That doesn't sound like, engine trouble where you'd have time to make a mayday call. It sounds immediate, catastrophic.
Exactly. Something happened that instantly incapacitated the plane or the crew, preventing any kind of distress signal. You can imagine the panic starting to build in the control tower, confusion turning into real fear very quickly.
And did anyone see anything from the ground?
Yes. Almost right away, reports started trickling in. Witnesses on the coast near Beirut, they said they saw a bright flash out over the sea.
A flash, like an explosion.
And they heard a loud explosion shortly after. That definitely doesn't sound like a control ditching or a simple mechanical failure, does it? It points towards something violent, an explosion, a midair breakup, maybe even, something external hitting it.
Oh, God. So search and rescue.
Launched immediately. And they found what was left, the shell of Flight 240, as one source put it.
Just fragments.
Debris scattered over a wide area of water, which confirms it broke apart, likely at altitude or on impact. The descriptions are grim, as you'd expect. Nearly unrecognizable wreckage, just a devastating scene.
And everyone on board.
Everyone, all 60 passengers and crew members, lost. A huge tragedy, especially for a relatively small country like Hungary at the time, and for Malev, their national airline. Hashtag 1.3, the aftermath and classified truth.
Which brings us right back to that core issue, doesn't it? The secrecy, the cover-up.
The immediate, total, state-mandated cover-up. Almost every piece of information about why this happened was instantly classified by the Hungarian authorities.
And it still is.
Still is. The official crash investigation reports, top secret to this day, nearly 50 years later, locked away.
Wow. And this is where that geopolitical context you mentioned earlier becomes so critical.
Absolutely. You have to ask, what were they trying to hide? What was so damaging that it needed to be buried for half a century?
Could it have been like poor maintenance, maybe issues with the Soviet-built plane itself? That would look bad.
It could have been. Or maybe incompetence in their own air traffic control system. Or something even darker. We're talking about the Middle East in 1975, a very volatile region. Was there military activity? Could the plane have been accidentally or intentionally shot down?
That turns it from a tragic accident into a massive political or even military incident.
Precisely. And think about the key evidence. The black boxes.
The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. FDR and CVR.
Every commercial jet has them. And given that the plane went down relatively close to the coast,
it's almost certain it would have been recovered from the wreckage, right?
Highly probable. Extremely likely. Those recorders hold the absolute key. The FDR tracks the plane's altitude, speed, control inputs, any system warnings. The CVR records everything said in the cockpit. The pilot's final words, any alarms, any external sounds.
Like the sound of an explosion or an impact.
Exactly. That data would tell the story. But it's never seen the light of day. Kept secret. For almost 5 decades.
So what do they say officially? What was the public told?
The official explanation, the only thing really released about the cause, was incredibly, almost insultingly vague.
What was it?
They said the crash was caused by a phenomenon that was entirely unexpected and unknown.
Unexpected and unknown. What does that even mean?
It means nothing. It's a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing while sounding vaguely technical. Think about it. If it truly was some brand new, baffling phenomenon that brought down a plane.
Wouldn't they want to share that? For global aviation safety. Alert other airlines, other countries.
You'd think so. Especially a regime like Hungary's, trying to build international credibility. Sharing that data with global bodies like the ICAO would have painted them as victims of a terrible, unpreventable event. It could have earned them sympathy, maybe even technical assistance.
But they didn't share it.
They did the opposite. They locked it down, buried it, which strongly suggests the cause wasn't unknown to them.
It was just unacceptable. Politically, militarily, something they couldn't afford to admit.
That seems the most logical conclusion. The CBR and FDR held a truth that was too damaging for the regime's image, or maybe its relationship with the Soviets, or its standing in a tense region.
And the cost of that secrecy, beyond just hiding the truth of that event.
Well, potentially, they withheld information that could have prevented future accidents. If there was a specific danger in that airspace, or a flaw in that aircraft type, hiding it puts others at risk.
So knowledge was sacrificed for political expediency.
It looks that way. The truth about Flight 240 became a casualty of the Cold War, locked away in a vault, turning a human tragedy into this enduring geopolitical puzzle.
Okay, so from this huge state secret designed to protect a nation's image, we're going to shift dramatically now.
Completely different kind of secrecy.
Yeah, to something incredibly intimate, a really horrifying story, sealed away not by the state for political reasons, but by authorities trying to, well, protect the public from the sheer awfulness of it.
We're moving into the case of John Rice Williams, and a piece of lost audio from back in 1964.
The motivation here is different, right? Not protecting the government, but shielding people from something just too gruesome.
Exactly, protecting public sensibility. So, let's set the scene. It's September 23rd, 1964. We're in a small cottage in Conisquay, North Wales, hashtag 2.1, setting the scene of a domestic tragedy.
And the scene the police walk into that evening,
Yeah.
our sources describe it as just absolutely sickening.
Horrific, yeah.
They find a woman, Annie Williams, dead on the living room floor. And it's clear she's been there for a while, maybe almost 3 days.
Dried blood.
Yeah, the details are grim. Her throat was wide open, and her head had been badly battered, signs of multiple concussions.
Just brutal, overwhelming violence, not a quiet death at all.
No. And this woman, Annie Williams, she was married to John Rice Williams. They'd been married since 1952.
And John, born back in 1916, on the surface, he seemed like a completely ordinary guy.
A working man. His job was listed as a railway ganger.
Right, which is basically like a foreman for a railway track maintenance crew. A respectable, steady job.
Yeah, part of the community. He even volunteered, apparently. Served as a waiter at the local British Legion Club.
And people who knew them, neighbors, they thought the marriage, which had lasted 12 years by this point, seemed pretty solid. Fruitful was the word used.
Just a normal, middle-aged, working-class couple.
Huh.
Which makes what the police found next even more shocking. Hashtag 2.2, the deterioration and the breaking point.
Because beneath that surface, things were falling apart. Badly.
What's going on?
Well, analysis points to a couple of major factors building up. One was Annie's mental health. Apparently, over the preceding months or even longer, it had started to seriously deteriorate.
Was she getting help?
The sources say her condition was largely undiagnosed and certainly untreated, which, in the early 60s.
Like, mental health support wasn't what it is now.
Not at all. And compounding this, John himself apparently had a significant problem with drinking. Excessive drinking, the reports call it.
So you've got her deteriorating mental state leading to, what, arguments?
Constant arguments, apparently. For months leading up to this. Combine that with his heavy drinking. It was a recipe for disaster. The source material calls it a ticking time bomb, just waiting to go off.
And clearly it did. Because when the police entered that cottage on September 23rd, they didn't just find Annie's body.
No, lying there, alongside her, they found the body of John Rice Williams himself.
And how had he died?
He had been decapitated.
Oh my God. So the police concluded?
Mm-hmm.
What? Murder-suicide?
That was the immediate conclusion. He had killed Annie in that brutal fashion and then days later taken his own life in an equally violent way.
But how did they know the sequence? How did they know what happened?
Because of something else they found right there at the scene. The crucial piece of this puzzle.
What was it?
An audio tape. Like a reel-to-reel tape, probably. And taped onto it was a handwritten note.
What did the note say?
Just 2 words. Message inside. Hashtag 2.3, the voice from the past.
Wow. So the killer left a recording. a confession.
His final statement. His attempt to explain the absolute horror of what he'd done.
Have people heard this tape? Is it available?
No. And this is the key point about the secrecy here. The tape itself was impounded by the authorities. It's never been released publicly.
Why not?
We'll get to that.
Good.
But importantly, transcripts were made for the coroner's inquest, for the legal process, and parts of those transcripts were quoted in newspaper reports at the time.
So we have a pretty good idea of what he said.
We do. It gives us this really chilling window into his mindset.
Okay, what did he say? What was on the recording?
Well, according to those reconstructed transcripts, he starts almost immediately trying to justify it. He says something like, I was compelled to do this.
Compelled?
Yeah. And then this awful, twisted rationale. He did not want her to go to the mental home. He actually frames the murder as some kind of misguided act of mercy, preventing her from being institutionalized.
That's incredibly disturbing. Did he show any remorse?
There's a flicker of it. He says, I'm very sorry that this has happened, but then he immediately pivots back to justifying himself. But I could not stick it no more.
Blaming her?
Totally. He paints Annie as the problem, says she'd been playing hell and awful over the last 3 or 4 months. He claims he could not stand arguing no more. It's all about his suffering, his inability to cope.
Does he describe the actual moment, the murder itself?
He does. He talks about coming home on the Sunday night, finding Annie upset, running about banging doors. Then he says she confronted him, came face to face to me with a knife in her hands.
A knife?
Yeah.
So he's claiming self-defense.
Not exactly. He says they had a little bit of a struggle, and then in that moment, he admits, I must have lost my head. That's when he killed her. Around midnight on Sunday.
But wait, the police found them on Wednesday, September 23rd. He killed her Sunday night. What happened in between?
This is maybe the most chilling part of the confession, the part that really shows the depth of, well, psychological break. He didn't kill himself right away. He didn't call the police.
What did he do?
He lived for almost 3 days with her body in the house. Yes. He explicitly says on the tape, I'm talking to you just now. It is Tuesday night. So he recorded this confession late Tuesday. And then he confirms, I have been to work on Monday and Tuesday.
He went to his job. As a railway gangair? While his wife's body was decomposing in their living room.
He did. Went to work, interacted with people, lived completely normal-seeming life for 2 full days after the murder.
How do you explain that? How can you do that?
He describes being in a trance, just going through the motions. He says he was walking here, there, and everywhere, just sort of numb, disconnected. Until finally, on that Tuesday night, he decided, so now I'm going to finish it off.
And that's when he recorded the tape and then killed himself.
That's the timeline his own confession lays out. The murder late Sunday, 2 days of dissociation, recording the confession Tuesday night, and then suicide, likely late Tuesday or early Wednesday, found later that day.
That tape, it's an incredible document, isn't it? From a psychological perspective, documenting the motive, the act, and that bizarre, terrifying gap afterwards.
Absolutely invaluable for understanding the dynamics of domestic violence, mental health breakdown, the psychology of homicide-suicide. It's a primary source of immense importance.
So why haven't we heard it? Why was it sealed?
This is where the secrecy comes in. The authorities at the time, the police, the coroner, the courts, they made a judgment call. They decided the actual audio recording, his voice describing these events, was simply too personal and too gruesome to show to the general public.
So protecting people's feelings, avoiding sensationalism.
Pretty much. Unlike the Malev case, where the state was protecting itself, here the decision was about, you could say, public decency. They felt the raw horror of hearing him describe killing his wife and then living with her body was just too disturbing.
They released transcripts, but kept the audio locked away.
Exactly. They decided the potential harm exploiting the family's tragedy, maybe inciting morbid curiosity, just the sheer visceral shock of it outweighed any historical or psychological benefit of making the original recording public. It was deemed better left unheard.
Okay, so we've had state secrecy for political reasons and secrecy for sort of public protection or sensibility. Our third case brings us to a different kind of intentional loss of evidence.
Yeah, this one's quite different again. We're moving into the modern era, a really infamous case. And here, the crucial evidence wasn't classified by the government or sealed away out of sensitivity.
It was deliberately destroyed by the justice system itself, after it had already served its purpose in court.
Exactly. We're talking about the horrific crimes of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, and specifically the videotapes they made.
This is a case many people will know, certainly in Canada, but internationally too. It was just notorious for its brutality.
And also for the massive controversy around the legal process, especially concerning the evidence and Karla Homolka's plea deal. But let's start with Paul Bernardo himself, born 1964, Ontario.
And on the surface, he seemed, well, almost perfect, didn't he?
Textbook golden boy facade, middle-class background, youngest child. People saw him as charming, smart, did well academically.
Studied economics at university, right? University of Toronto. Looked like a successful, ordinary young Canadian man.
But underneath that polished surface, a completely different reality, a monstrous one. Even before he became a household name for murder, back in the late 1980s.
He was already active.
Very active. Police later linked him to a whole string of crimes, at least 16 sexual assault cases, a clear pattern of predatory violence already well established.
And then he meets Karla Homolka. When was that?
1987. And their relationship initially was apparently quite stormy, lots of fighting.
But it changed.
It morphed into something truly terrifying, a partnership. Our sources state that Homolka eventually not only knew about Bernardo's crimes, but approved of Bernardo's actions and often joined him with his crimes.
So she wasn't just aware, she became an active participant.
A willing accomplice. For almost 3 years, they worked together, escalating their crimes, moving from assault to organized abduction, torture, and murder.
Who were their targets?
Primarily women, but the sources are very clear. They also targeted, abducted, and assaulted underage girls. Hashtag 3.2, the victims, and the scope of the crimes.
And their methods. They weren't just using brute force, were they? It was more insidious.
Calculated is the word they used to call it. Basically, ways to gain trust or manipulate victims into vulnerable situations.
Getting them into their car or their home.
Exactly, isolating them, making them powerless against them with not a single soul around to help. It was planned predation.
Can we talk about one of the specific victims? Christine French.
Yes, she was only 15. The timeline is just heartbreakingly mundane until it isn't. August 16th, 1992, actually, not 64, as mentioned in the outline, apologies. She leaves for school in the morning, standard routine.
Okay.
Later that day, she's walking home. It's a short walk, maybe 12 minutes, a route she took all the time.
And that's when they saw her.
Witnesses saw her being approached by the couple, Bernardo and Homolka. She apparently talked with them for a moment. Then, seemingly willingly, she got into their car.
Just jumped in.
Jumped into their car, yeah. The couple got in too, and the car just speeds off, never to be seen again. That presence of Homolka, the seemingly normal couple, it clearly lowered victims' guards, made the abduction easier.
It's horrific. And then there's the crime involving Karla's own sister.
This is perhaps the most disturbing crime of all, revealing the absolute depth of their depravity. Karla Homolka's younger sister, Tammy, also just 15.
What did they do?
It was a joint effort, planned. Karla drugged her own sister. Then, both Bernardo and Homolka raped and tortured her.
Her own sister.
And tragically, Tammy died during the assault. She choked on her own vomit while incapacitated.
How was that not discovered immediately as a murder?
Incredibly, at the time, her death was ruled an accident, which of course allowed Bernardo and Homolka to continue their crimes, their secret safe, for a while longer. The level of betrayal involved. Drugging and assaulting your own sibling. It's almost incomprehensible. Hashtag 3.3, the arrest, the deal, and the lost evidence.
So how did it all unravel? When did the police finally catch up to them?
The net started closing in January 1993. Police found forensic evidence that linked back to Karla Homolka.
And she was arrested.
Yes. And almost immediately, she started cooperating, talking to the police, which led to, well, one of the most controversial legal deals in Canadian history.
The plea bargain.
The plea bargain. In exchange for her full testimony against Paul Bernardo, detailing his role in the crimes, she was offered a drastically reduced charge, manslaughter, not murder.
What sentence did that carry?
A maximum of 12 years, compared to the mandatory life sentence Bernardo would face if convicted of first-degree murder.
People were outraged, weren't they? The public reaction was intense, calling it a deal with the devil.
Absolutely furious. The idea that Homolka, who by her own admission was a participant in these horrific acts, including against her own sister, could get such a relatively light sentence, it caused massive public anger and put enormous pressure on the entire justice system.
But her testimony was crucial to getting Bernardo.
It was key. Based partly on her information and crucially on DNA evidence they gathered, Bernardo was arrested in February 1993.
And then came the discovery of the tapes.
Yes. During a warranted search of the house Bernardo and Homolka had shared, police found them, the videotapes.
How many were there?
6 tapes, containing, allegedly, about 3.5 hours of footage in total.
And what was on them?
They documented the sexual assault, the torture, the degradation of their victims, recorded by Bernardo, often with Homolka present or participating.
Oh, God. So this was direct, undeniable proof.
Undeniable. Primary source evidence of the crimes themselves, filmed by the perpetrator. It was shown during Bernardo's trial. And the sources are clear. The proof it provided was absolute. It blew any possible defense out of the water.
So Bernardo was convicted.
Convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, forcible confinement, aggravated sexual assault. He received a life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. He's still in prison today.
And Homolka.
She served her 12 years for manslaughter, as per the deal. And controversially, she was released. She walks free today, living under a new identity.
Which still generates anger and debate.
Constantly. But the final piece of this story, the part that relates directly to our theme of lost media, is what happened to those tapes after the trial.
They weren't archived? Kept as evidence?
No, this is the crucial point. The courts, the authorities, they made a specific ruling. They deemed the content incredibly disturbing.
Understandable.
And they essentially concluded that now the trial was over and the conviction secured, there was simply no reason to keep them.
No reason, not even for the historical record.
Their reasoning was focused elsewhere. They felt it was best that they be destroyed.
Why? What was the rationale for actively destroying such crucial evidence?
Primarily, it seems, to protect the victims' families from any possibility of the tapes leaking, being copied, or sensationalized in the future, to prevent re-traumatization, and also, likely, to stop the tapes themselves from becoming some kind of morbid collector's item or source material for, the darkest corners of the internet.
So, a decision based on preventing future harm and maintaining dignity, rather than preserving evidence.
Exactly. It was a deliberate choice to erase them. So today, those 6 videotapes simply do not exist. They were destroyed, likely incinerated. Any attempt to study them, to see the raw reality of those crimes from the perpetrator's perspective, it's impossible.
And the source you mentioned reflects on this.
Yeah, the source concludes with a really powerful thought. Considering the content presumed to be on them, it's safe to say that some things are better off lost forever.
Which is a heavy statement. It represents this third type of secrecy, doesn't it? Not state control, not just public sensibility, but an active judicial decision to prioritize protection over preservation.
Right. The justice system, perhaps under the weight of the public fury over the Homolka deal and the sheer horror of the tapes, chose erasure. They sacrificed the complete, unvarnished historical record, what those tapes truly showed, for what they saw as the greater good, protecting the victim's legacy and preventing further exploitation.
But it does raise questions, doesn't it, about the role of courts? Is their job just to deliver justice in the present, or do they also have a duty to preserve the full historical record, however ugly it might be?
It's a huge ethical dilemma, because while the destruction was likely well-intentioned, maybe even necessary from a human perspective, it means future understanding of Bernardo and Homolka, of the dynamics of their crimes, relies only on testimony, transcripts, secondary accounts.
Never the raw primary evidence itself.
Never the raw evidence. The system chose, in effect, a clean break over complete, potentially dangerous knowledge. #tag outro.
So 3 cases, 3 very different kinds of hidden history. What's the thread connecting them all? What does it all mean when we put them side by side like this?
Well, we've really seen the different engines driving secrecy, haven't we?
Yeah. We started with Malev Flight 240. That was pure state secrecy, right? Cold War politics, protecting the national image, maybe covering up incompetence or something worse, leading to crucial aviation data, the CVR and FDR, being locked away forever.
The cost of that knowledge was just too high for the Hungarian regime's survival, it seems. Then we shifted to the John Rice Williams tape.
Much more personal. The horror was intimate, familial, and the secrecy there was, well, paternalistic, you could say. Authorities deciding the raw audio was just too gruesome, too shocking for the public, protecting sensibility over access.
Prioritizing decorum, perhaps, over the raw psychological data. And finally, the Bernardo and Homolka tapes.
A modern case. Here, the judicial system itself made the call. The evidence was so vile, the context so controversial with Homolka's deal, that they chose deliberate destruction, eradication to prevent trauma and sensationalism, even at the cost of the complete historical record.
So, political self-preservation, public sensibility, judicial protection, different motives, but the same outcome in a way.
In every single case, the full story, the unvarnished truth captured in that primary evidence, was deliberately withheld or destroyed. We're left trying to understand these events with key pieces missing.
Which forces us to ask that really difficult question. What's the right balance? When does our need or our right to know the full history clash with the need to protect people, whether it's a nation's image, public feelings, or victims' families?
Where do you draw the line?
And that tension, that conflict, it's always there when we deal with difficult parts of the past. The very act of deciding what to hide, what to destroy, that decision itself becomes part of the history we need to understand.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these pretty dark corners and the powerful, sometimes invisible forces that decide what parts of history we actually get to see.
Thank you. It's unsettling stuff to explore.
It really is. And before we go, here's something to think about, maybe mull over. Related to that first case, Malev 240, those black boxes, the CVR and FDR, still classified after almost 50 years. If the official reason for the crash truly was something entirely unexpected and unknown, doesn't keeping that a secret potentially endanger flights today? Are they withholding vital safety information that could prevent another tragedy in that airspace or with similar aircraft?
Or is the opposite true?
How so?
Does the fact that they have kept it secret for so long, so rigidly,
Uh-oh.
does that secrecy itself tell us more than the official explanation ever could? Does it reveal the real truth wasn't unknown, but rather something politically explosive about the Cold War, about Soviet influence, about the realities behind the Iron Curtain? Maybe the secret is the story.
Something for you to definitely think about.